Today on Off Grid Style Podcast, we're talking Alaskapox, zombie deer, and warnings of a worse virus than the one we saw in 2020.
Flight crew, please prepare for takeoff.
Minute till self-destruction.
So Alaska has a state bird, the willow ptarmigan, a state tree, the Sitka spruce, and now it has its very own state virus. So I've taken excerpts from the NPR, On Scene Alert, PBS, and Google were all used to create this segment. Alaska health officials reported last week that a man died in January after contracting a virus known as Alaskapox. The disease was first discovered in a person living near Fairbanks, Alaska in 2015, and there have been several known infections since then. Hasn't been a big, huge deal, and nobody's really talked about it much, except that this guy died. Officials believe that last month's case is the first fatality from the newly discovered virus, as well as the first known case outside of the state's interior. It still was in Alaska, just not in the middle of nowhere. Authorities are now urging doctors across the state to be on the lookout for signs of the disease. The elderly man who lived in the Kenai Peninsula was being treated for cancer and had a suppressed immune system because of the drugs. In September, he noticed a red sore under his right armpit, and he went to see doctors over the next 2 months because of fatigue and burning pain. He was hospitalized in November and died last month, according to a bulletin last week from Alaska public health officials. So he had this thing for 2 months, was in the hospital many times, but nobody figured out that that's what it was. Granted, it's a very, very tiny amount of people who've gotten it so far. It's just really weird what this thing does and what it is. The man lived in a remote forested area and did not travel. He had been repeatedly scratched by a stray cat that hunted small animals, and one of the scratches was in the area of the man's armpit, officials said. There is that psycho cat link again, them wanting to get the cats and get them out of our lives. And I just heard the other day that now they're worried about the pets' carbon footprints. I don't know. I don't know. I can't tell you. Authorities note that the immunocompromised people may be at a higher risk for severe illness from the virus, and so far the only known cases of Alaskapox have been detected within the state. Alaskapox is a type of orthopox virus that infects mammals, including humans, and causes skin lesions. Other orthopox virus include the now eradicated smallpox virus, as well as Mpox, which was previously known as monkeypox, and experienced an outbreak of thousands of cases worldwide in 2022. Alaska's Division of Public Health says the virus has been found primarily in small animals in the Fairbanks area, such as shrews and red-backed voles. I don't think I've ever seen either one of those animals in real life. I mean, I've met a shrew, but it was a woman and she was shrewish, but I've never actually like, oh, look, honey, there's a cute little vole going by. I've never met either one of those type of animals or seen them. That's part of Alaska, I guess. Get your own pox and see voles. Patients typically have one or more skin lesions and can also develop swollen lymph nodes and joint or muscle pain. Officials believe there have been more cases of Alaskapox in humans that weren't caught, which would make sense that more than like 8 or 10 people have gotten it. It's just weird that you haven't heard of more of them. So I have a feeling that people are just writing it off as, oh, look, I have a little spot. To date, no human-to-human transmission has been documented, as far as they know, Alaska's Department of Health says. But officials also believe there are more cases that have gone unreported. No one seems to be able to answer the question of why this is only in Alaska and hasn't spread to other places like even Canada. I'm pretty sure the infected animals don't just stop at the border because nothing else does. Everything else comes across our border, so I don't know why this wouldn't. So while Alaska deals with record snow, people who really, really like to live alone, and scary new state motto, Alaska, north to the last frontier, and weird pox thing, let's look at a cousin of this Alaskapox. Mpox, formerly known as monkeypox. Mpox. Information for the creation of this segment includes On Scene Alert, the CDC, the World Health Organization, and the Washington Post, just to name a few of the places that I dug into for this one. I'm not sure why they changed the name, but I kind of am. It's monkeypox. That's what we've always known it as. Maybe I thought the monkeys were offended, like naming the virus or a virus after a place it came from. Right? Well, I tell you in a minute why they changed the name. I do know. According to the website of the World Health Organization, they decided to change the name following a series of consultation with global experts. They are phasing out the name monkeypox because apparently there were inappropriate comments about that term after all these years. There is a vaccine for Mpox, and it requires 2 doses. Most Americans aren't running to get this for some strange reason. Some suspicion about vaccines, I guess. I don't know. Only about 1.2 million U.S. vaccines have been given, as far as the CDC said. According to the CDC and updated on February 8th of this year, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is having its largest Mpox outbreak ever recorded. Since January 1, 2024, the DRC has reported 12,569 cases and 581 deaths. The Mpox virus, also known as MPV, can cause an illness that includes rashes and other symptoms. While cases of Mpox are usually rare in the U.S., in 2022, the United States and many other countries experienced a large outbreak of Mpox. And what it, again, sticks in the back of my head was in the 80s when we had HIV that, was not known here and nobody had heard about it. It only took one person to travel, and suddenly it was everywhere. Most people do not have serious symptoms, but children, pregnant women, and people who are immunocompromised, and also people with untreated and advanced HIV can have serious complications. Common symptoms of Mpox include a rash, which may last for 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, so if you end up with a rash anywhere on your body and it doesn't go away and you've got it for 4 weeks, you need to go to the doctor anyway, regardless of where it's at, what you've been doing, whatever. If you have a rash that lasts that long, you need to see a doctor. You have some kind of issue. This may start with or be followed by fever, headache, muscle aches, back pain, low energy, swollen glands or lymph nodes. The rash looks like blisters or sores. Get this one. Can affect the face, palms of the hands, soles of the feet, the groin, the genitalia, and or anal regions. Again, if you have a rash lasting 2 to 4 weeks in any of those places, you need to go to a doctor. I would think that would be common sense, but just letting you know, go to a doctor. It gets better. The lesions may also be found in the mouth or really any orifice of the body. And the number of sores in any of those openings can range from 1 sore to several thousand sores. If you have a sore in any orifice of your body, go to a doctor. Period. End of story. I don't know why there's some confusion somewhere about this. If you have sores in places that there shouldn't be anything, you need to see someone. Get some help for that. Bless their hearts. According to available data, between 0.1 and 10% of people with Mpox have died. I guess they can't really narrow it down any more than that because of their reporting availability, in that country, I guess is the reason why it's such a huge disparity between the bottom and the top number. It's all I can think of is that's why they don't have better data there. All right, so what about this Mpox? People who have close contact, including sexual contact with someone who has Mpox are at risk. Well, I would assume so, since they have somewhere in between 1 and several thousand lesions in the portions of their body that you normally would have sex with. I would think you're probably at risk if you do that. Yes. People who have contact with clothing, bedding, towels, objects, electronics, and other surfaces that have been touched by someone with Mpox are also at risk. So this is by far more contagious than HIV, for instance. And what they're saying is what people used to believe about people with HIV. Oh, you can catch it just by being near them or whatever. Listen to what it said again. If you have contact with clothing, bedding, towels, objects, electronics, and other surfaces that have even been touched by someone with Mpox, you are also at risk. That is freaky. It is interesting that it primarily stays in the Congo. The 2022 outbreak that affected the U.S. and other countries is believed to have started in Nigeria. So patient 0 was actually in the Congo, but then it went to Nigeria and spread from there, apparently. That is what the information I could find is saying. But the bottom line is, think about what you touch every single day. I mean, we kind of went through this in 2020, 21, where we were using hand sanitizer for everything. I mean, we were bathing in it because we were concerned about catching the virus. However, this, you literally brush against anything and you have a chance of contracting this virus. Clothing, bedding, surface, electronics, a doorknob, a basket in the grocery store that somebody else has touched and now you're touching. Think about all the things you touch on a regular basis that you don't do something about cleaning your hands afterwards. A pen. Not my pen. This is my pen. Only I touch my pen. But I'm a pen hoe. I collect pens. Anyway, but think about that for a second. That's just freaky. So the virus was first detected in 1970 and has been around, obviously, since then. But it primarily lives, if you will, in the Congo and in that region. But HIV had been around for a while before it really came to be known. Not as long, but it had still been around for at least a decade before the U.S. really became aware of it on a large scale. So, and I don't mean to keep referring to HIV. It's just that's the one we know the best of these types of viruses. So that's the one I keep referring to. I don't mean to select out HIV. So now that I've discussed your orifice lesions and how you can contract, from having sex with somebody or in close contact with somebody who has lesions in their orifices, let's move on to zombie deer. That sounds like a fun one to discuss. So I had somebody comment on a video that I did, and I forget what the video was about. I think it was about how to do a solar oven or something, and they wanted to know if I could tell them how long they needed to cook zombie flesh for. And I was like, ha, 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 so funny, blah, blah, blah. All right. But hey, maybe we're getting closer to that with these zombie deer that are apparently a lot more prevalent than we realized. I did a story on this, a very short story through On Scene Alert a little while back, and I didn't really think a whole lot about it until I started researching for this podcast, and that's where I discovered how spread out and widespread, I should say, this chronic wasting disease. It's scary, and you're going to hear some information that's going to freak you out. Before I get to zombie deer, though, I do want to mention, I've said on Scene Alert several times in this video, just so you know, I use On Scene Alert for all of my updates that I give on my YouTube channel. So anytime you see a critical incident alert, it's because I've received a text from On Scene Alert letting me know, and letting me know before the actual news channels, the MSM, actually can get any of the information disseminated and get it out to people. So it's really cool that I get to know and let my subscribers know that quickly that something is going on before the news can even cover it. On Scene Alert is amazing. It's a nice guy named Mike who is the owner and president of it. He lives here in the United States. He is in emergency management, and it is 3 times a week I get global incident reports from him. You would get those in your email, and then anytime there's an issue, you receive a text message. And he doesn't blow up your phone. You don't get blow-ups from their call center and everything. No, it's just when you need to know something that you hear from them. I will put the link in the description, and go ahead and check him out. It's free for 30 days, and I did tell him if I covered and used his information, I wanted a 30% discount for my listeners and my watchers. So you can get 30% off if you go over there, sign up, and you decide you like it and want to keep it. So back to zombie deer. No, it's not just deer. We're not going to be, discriminatory. It's other animals as well. Information was gathered from hell and back for this one. I'm just letting you know. I went all over. On Scene Alert, the CDC, the World Health Organization, the Guardian, National Deer Association, University of Florida, Gainesville, which is huge on all kinds of different research, and even Scientific American. And there was probably more. So the technical term for this is chronic wasting disease, and it affects animals that have hooves, but not barnyard animals. Cervids, or moose, reindeer, elk, and deer are the ones who contract it. And from all the reporting I'm finding, it's spreading. I don't know how much all of these groups talk to each other, but that I just named, but it's gotten pretty bad. It has now been found in at least 32 states that they're aware of. It is in Canada. 80% of bucks in southern Saskatchewan, buck mule deer in Saskatchewan have this disease. 80%. It starts out slow, but the life expectancy of the animal that contracts it once they begin to exhibit symptoms is about 2 years. The disease damages the brain and the nervous system. It got the name zombie deer disease because it eats away at the brain, making it look kind of like Swiss cheese at the end. And it causes the deer to have neurological issues. They stumble, they drool, they have blank stares, they have a lack of fear of people. They just kind of watch you as you come up to them and I guess shoot them or whatever if you're hunting. Listlessness, they just don't want to move or jump or run away. They've also apparently, they're not getting out of the way of cars either. When they have this, they just sit there and watch the car come at them, and that's that. You can also tell it by the way they walk with their heads lowered. So stumbling and the walking with the head lowered would be the two most prominent visual characteristics that you would see of any of the cervid animals that might have this. Wild deer with CWD, or chronic wasting disease, rarely appear sick to our eyes until the end. They may carry and spread this disease for up to 2 years before visible signs appear. And the neurological effects of the disease lead them to be more prone to other causes of death in the meantime. Like I said, they become less fearful, so they end up getting run over, they end up hurting themselves, those types of things, because they're just not as afraid of potential predators as they were before they contracted the disease. This sounds a lot like the rat, cat, worm that I talked about last week. that causes rats to become Rambo rats and try to take on cats. But anyway, beside the point. Over the past 2 months, several areas of the country have reported cases of the disease for the first time, including Kentucky, Yellowstone National Park, and, for some odd reason, this was singled out, Coleman County, Texas. There is no vaccine or treatment for chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease is transmitted by direct animal-to-animal contact or indirectly through contact with infectious particles that remain in the environment in feces, soil, or vegetation. And the zombie deer disease name is actually because this disease essentially turns the brain of the animals it affects into a zombie-like state, and they act like zombies. They're zoned out. They're not aware of what's going on around them. So that's where this name originally came from. Although there have been no reported cases of chronic wasting disease infection in people, this is interesting how they word this, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warn that a risk to humans may exist. The health agency cites some research suggesting that monkeys may become infected if they eat meat from chronic wasting disease infected animals, or if they come into contact with brain or body fluids from infected deer or elk. Mad cow disease, which belongs to the same family of illnesses as chronic wasting disease, originated in cattle, but humans can get a variant called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is fatal. So it is possible to get one of its, I guess you'd call it cousins, and they show that monkeys have become infected with it when they ate infected meat. And monkeys are very close to us on the evolutionary scale. So the thought there is, hey, it may happen. Now, I don't know if that meat was cooked or not. I don't know anything about it. That's all I read, and it was the Centers for Disease Control that had this. They didn't go into any specificity. To be on the safe side, health officials recommend that people do not consume meat from CWD-infected animals. The World Health Organization has also stressed the importance of keeping the agents of all known prion diseases from entering the human food system. So this is a prion disease, FYI. And what it is it twists and mutates a certain protein in the body. I think it's a protein. And that is how you end up with this chronic wasting disease. And so they're saying that you need to keep agents of all known prion diseases from entering the human food system. The disease has actually been around for decades. I could find no legitimate explanation for why it has suddenly spread so quickly, because it has been around forever. It was originally discovered in captive deer in a Colorado research facility in the late 1960s near Fort Collins. And that is about, for those of you who know about it, I looked it up, that's about 5 hours away from the Biological Research Center known as Rumble, RMBL. So for all of you who know about those things, I did try to see how far away it was, and it is quite a distance. But I do find it interesting that it was captive deer that it was originally found in. Not wild deer, but captive deer. So how did the captive deer at the Biology Research Facility in Colorado develop this? Inquiring minds want to know. And not to be outdone, we've got to bring up California. Valley fever is expected to explode this year with record rainfall and snowfall numbers over the winter. References for this story include Wired, CDC, the California government websites, all that good stuff. Valley fever is an infection caused by a fungus that I'm never going to be able to pronounce. It's a fungus. The fungus is known to live in the soil in the southwestern U.S. and parts of Mexico and Central and South America. So all over that way with the deserts and that kind of thing. The fungus was also recently found in south central Washington, which is not so deserty. Interesting. People can get valley fever by breathing in the microscopic fungal spores from the air, although most people who breathe in the spores don't get sick. Usually, people who get sick with valley fever will get better on their own within a couple weeks to months, but some people do need antifungal medication. People who are at risk because of other issues can have a severe reaction. So if they have comorbidities, they definitely can get much sicker than those that are healthy as a horse. Not a deer, but a horse. Most people who have valley fever make a full recovery. A small percent of people develop long-term lung infections that can take several years to get better. In very severe cases of valley fever, the nervous system can be affected and there may be long-term damage. But they say this is very rare. However, we're going to have record numbers this year of this fungus spore because of what's going on with the weather, which I'll address in a minute. Nodules may show up on your lungs in more serious cases, and they never go away. So it's kind of like TB. I show positive for TB, and so they can test that and see that I don't have it. I'm not had it. But if I am ever exposed to it again, it's probably from when I lived in the Philippines as a kid. But if I'm exposed to it again, chances are I'm going to catch it. But they can tell that I have the possibility of it. So this sounds like it's much the same way. Also, there's a couple other things that they can tell, years later that you've had it. And apparently this is very similar. They never go away. You have them for the rest of your life in some of the more serious cases. It is not contagious. This is a fungal spread. This is not anything that's viral or along those lines. Because of the record rainfalls in California, this fungus is expected to grow exponentially. Last year, it had set a record for the number of infected people, and that was before all of these rain rivers that came through and have been wiping out California the last couple of months. The fungus doesn't grow well in places with year-round rain or constant droughts. So it doesn't like a lot of moisture and it doesn't like too much dryness. It needs the on-again, off-again rain that you get in California and other southwestern states to thrive. When it rains, the fungus grows massively in the soil. It just sprouts up all over the place. Once the dirt dries out, the spores dry out, anything can stir up the spores. Wind, walking on them, driving on them, anything can stir them up and put them into the air, and then they're inhaled. I can even see in the big 18-wheelers, driving down some of those lonely freeways and highways, and they're going fast, and the wind from their truck blows up these dried out spores, and now they're in the air, and they catch the tailwind of the truck, and they can go for probably a while, at least several miles, if not longer, before they fall off, and then they get picked up again by another vehicle and follow its tailwind for so long. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that valley fever cases in the U.S. rose from 2,271 in 1998, no big deal, to 20,000 cases in 2019, which is a 780% increase. In Arizona, where 2/3 of valley fever diagnoses typically occur, cases have risen 600%. Here's that word, but coccidioides spores have cropped up in new regions in recent years, expanding through Southern California into Northern California, even up into the drier parts of Oregon and Washington states. The rate of growth of valley fever in California is higher than in Arizona. Cases there rose more than 1,000% over the same time period. So I kind of ran through that. Let me reiterate that. The rate of growth of valley fever in California is higher than in Arizona. Cases in California rose more than 1,000% over the same time period. As one doctor said, what kind of disease do you see a 1,000% increase in a matter of 2 decades? Not many. Not many. That's kind of scary. And it's going to be interesting to see how many people are affected. We'll be hearing about it, I'm sure, in probably, I would imagine, maybe another month or two. They didn't specify when or what time of year it really affects people, but I would imagine somewhere, once everything changes over and spring kicks into gear. So I would imagine, like I said, end of March, April, May gives it a chance to dry out and then spore away and begin having people inhale it. And then we'll see how bad it gets. Hopefully it doesn't. We all hope it doesn't. But it sounds like it's going to get pretty bad. And speaking of all of this overall, it's like every single day I turn around, there's a new virus. There's a new scary thing on the horizon, or there's been one, but we haven't talked about it until now because now we can't hide it. And so we got to talk about it. And it's just getting ridiculous. It's getting to the point where people do not want to leave their homes because all of this is coming out slowly but surely, and they've known about it. They've known about every single one of the things I just talked to you about for years, if not decades, if not longer. Like the zombie deer disease, 1960. And we're just now realizing how widespread it is. One of the reasons I think it may be more widespread now than it has been in the past is because we're finally seeing the deer population pick back up to where it was pre 1930s depression. It finally has caught back up to where it was because people were hunting them back then and hunted them almost to extinction. So all of you who out there who have said, oh, you know what, I'm not too worried about it. I'm a great hunter. So, when the time comes, I can just go ahead and shoot my own deer and eat it. Well, I would be careful with that because now you know that there's a whole lot of them out there that are infected. They did not talk as much about does as they did the bucks. They brought up the bucks more, and I'm not sure what that is about. But regardless, that food choice may be a limited one for you. And I actually saw in certain areas where they have drop-off locations, and they will come also and test your meat for you. They will test it to tell you if your deer, moose, elk, whatever, has the chronic wasting disease prior to you eating it. I do not know how fast they get to you, but I did read that as well. So we've got all of these scary things going on. And this is just one area of scariness. There are so many other ones out there. And I've done this and said this. I did it in a video about which crisis is going to be the one that begins toppling the dominoes. And it makes you wonder because every day we're faced with a new crisis and a new domino that's teetering on the edge of toppling. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a little shorter, a little more informational. And let me know what you thought. Like if you're watching on YouTube. And I hope to see y'all again for my next podcast next Wednesday. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.